Afternoon, everyone. I'm Cherie Gordon, Business Development with Economic Development Department, and I also serve on the Native American Heritage Month Employee Planning Committee. I'm honored to welcome you to the first City of Fort Worth Native American Heritage Month Employee Program. Today, we'll be sharing a historical presentation on Native tribes in Texas, acknowledging the land and its peoples. This historical presentation is being provided by Dr. Les Writing with the University of Texas at Arlington, and Ms. Christy Willis, former president of the UTA Native American Student Association and Community Liaison. Dr. Les Writing is of Pawnee Osage heritage, and Christy Willis is of Choctaw heritage. We will also have a performance from the Indigenous ACE with the Indigenous Cultures Institute located in San Marcos, Texas. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Christina Brooks, the City of Fort Worth's Chief Equity Officer and Director of the Diversity and Inclusion Department, who will share a few remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we get started, I really want to acknowledge our staff that work on these monthly cultural programs every month and have just done an outstanding job. One of which are Veronica Villegas, our diversity and inclusion manager, has been really instrumental, and unfortunately she is not here with us today. We're sending her prayers and good wishes as she is recovering from a pretty serious illness. So before I started, I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged her. Nahui, Kumbak Iha Galalahi. Welcome. My name is Galalahi of the Cherokee. I am also Christina Brooks, your Chief Equity Officer and Director of the Diversity and Inclusion Department. Today, as we open our first annual Native American Heritage Month celebration, we would like to acknowledge our land. We respectfully acknowledge that we're standing on the traditional lands of the Hassani, a family of tribes consisting of the Arikara, Pawnee, Wichita, Kitsai, and Caddo, who lived on this land dating back to pre-Columbian times along the Trinity River, extending to the Red River, which is now known as Fort Worth, Texas. The Hassani people's legacy can be found today at ceremonials at the Caddo Tribal Complex near Binger, Oklahoma, every month during the summer. To acknowledge this land is to recognize its longer history and our place in that history. It is to recognize these lands and waters and their significance for the peoples who lived and continue to live in this region, whose practices and spiritualities were and are tied to the land and the water, and those whose lives continue to enrich and develop in relationship to the land, waters, and other inhabitants today. I now have the distinct pleasure of introducing, representing city leadership, Assistant City Manager Fernando Costa, who will provide a message from the City Manager's office.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for what you and the Diversity and Inclusion Department do throughout the year to help us appreciate the diverse cultures that contribute to our workforce. And welcome to all city employees who are able to join us today. We know from research on this subject that a diverse workforce, an inclusive workforce, tends to be a more productive and effective workforce. And that's why diversity and inclusion are so important for us in the development of the Fort Worth city workforce. That's why we celebrate the various heritages that contribute to the workforce in Fort Worth today, because it helps us to serve an increasingly diverse community comprised of folks from many different backgrounds. And those folks have contributed to a rich history in Fort Worth. We usually mark the history of Fort Worth as beginning in 1849, when Major Ripley Arnold helped to establish a U.S. Army encampment on the banks of the Trinity River. But we know that Native Americans were here for centuries, long before the European settlers moved here. That is a very large part of what Fort Worth is today. And we all need to learn more about it. And my challenge for those of you who are able to join us today is not only to enjoy this cultural celebration, including the wonderful food, the native tacos that we're enjoying, but what you're about to experience with our guests. But please take back to the workplace what you're able to learn today, and help your coworkers to appreciate what a marvelous cultural heritage we enjoy in Fort Worth, including what we're about to experience today about our Native American heritage. So, it's my pleasure to turn the lectern over to Professor Riding, who will present the program. Professor Riding.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Les Ridingen, and I am an enrolled member of the Pawnee tribe and a member of the Osage tribe. I am currently the Assistant Dean at the University of Texas at Arlington in the College of Liberal Arts, and also serve as the main advisor for the Native American Student Association on our campus. Along with that, this past couple years, I've served as chair for the Land Acknowledgement Task Force at UT Arlington. I'll be sharing that story a little bit toward the end of this presentation. I've also contributed to various land acknowledgement task force in our community, most notably the Almond Carter Museum and the Dallas Museum of Art. Today, I'm also wearing my Pawnee Nation College shirt. I'm chair of the Board of Trustees for Pawnee Nation College, and that's located in Pawnee, Oklahoma. And I'll touch briefly on tribal colleges toward the end of the presentation as well. I'm honored to be joined by Christy Willis, an alumnus of UT Arlington and former president of NASA. Christy, you want to come up here and speak to yourself? Just introduce yourself real quickly.
Thank you, Les. Halito, Sohachifayat Christy Willis, Chata Nation of Oklahoma, Citizen Sia, Mitchell, Arlington, Texas, Mentally. Hello, my name is Christy Willis, and I am a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I am also a enrolled member. I do say citizen because we are also a sovereign nation. So pleasure to be with you all, and I'm also, like Les said, I'm a former president of UTA Native American Student Association, community liaison, and I appreciate you all.
Thank you. We have come a long way these last 2 years. I want to share a story about one of the conversations regarding the land acknowledgement work at UT Arlington. I shared this conversation at our recent Indigenous Peoples Day event last month, but it lends itself well to this presentation. So it was about 6 months ago when we were in one of our land acknowledgement meetings. We have already completed the wording of the land acknowledgement statement, which took a better part of a year. During this meeting, we were discussing this big, beautiful, solid bronze plaque, where we're going to put it. That was certainly the more lively debate, is where to put this bronze plaque at the upcoming commemorative garden. One person suggested the wall's where it should be. There's a building there, and there's a wall. Another member of the task force said, well, the roundhouse is a natural spot for this. We have a roundhouse that's also adjoining the garden. Then someone else on the committee said, well, we need to use the standard mounts that UTA uses across campus for this. That way it's uniform across campus. Well, then Daryl Loster, probably our most calm participant on the task force, said this. I have a 2-ton granite boulder that I will gift for this garden. We all were kind of in silence. Who has a 2-ton granite boulder that they're able to gift? Well, sculptors do. And our task force was made up of highly creative people and minds, sculptors, artists, architects, historians, archivists, archaeologists, educators, and of course, emerging scholars and alumnus such as Christy. That's what makes a good task force, is the variety of folks that we've had serving on it. When I talk to my colleagues at other institutions, whether about the powwow or the land acknowledgement, I get a common question. How are you able to do all that? Both Christy and I can attest that UT Arlington is a place where Native American and Indigenous students have called home for over 30 years. And I have to give a plug in case you did not know. The Native American Student Association is the longest running Native American college student group in Texas. That is true. Our Native and Indigenous pathways at UTA lead to a major highway where there are few obstructions and multiple opportunities. Our ancestors who stood here centuries ago, I think they would be rather proud of the work that we have accomplished. And that's what brings us here today. Not only our work, but the work and sacrifices of our ancestors. So we're going to be sharing 2 stories today. One about American Indians in Texas, and the second is regarding land acknowledgement. We want to start with American Indians in Texas, and I think this quote by Skinner that's now showing is a good starting spot as it specifically highlights our relationship with the United States federal government. Because you see, when the boats arrived, there was no United States. There were inhabited lands and many great cultures. This led to a series of frontier wars throughout the 1700s and 1800s. Yet the Indians were resilient, and this led to also a series of federal policies to figure out the Indian problem. So this quote, American Indians and Alaska Natives have a unique government-to-government relationship between individual sovereign Native nations and the U.S. government. There is no other minority or ethnic group with this status. So let's look at the 1800s, a period of assimilation, wars, and removal. One of these wars was led by General Edward Tarrant. No doubt this guy was a professional Indian fighter. It was his military that massacred the Caddo Indians along the Trinity River. There were various acts and treaties during this time period, most notably the Indian Appropriations Act of 1851 and the Dawes Act of 1861. So when we talk about Texas, as much as I hate to say it, General Tarrant did a pretty good job of exterminating around here. So we had Comanches, we had Caddos, we had Choctaws and other tribes, but they were all left. They all left. And today there are no Indian reservations. There are 3, I believe, Indian reservations in the state of Texas. The Alabama Coushatta, which was formed in 1854, the Isleta de Pueblos, which is about 75 acres, and the Kickapoo tribe of Texas, down in South Texas, 125 acres. Now, I want to mention the Dawes Act because I will bring it up again. This was an effort to give allotments to tribal members. It broke up the tribe and tried to make farmers out of Indians, gave them their own plot of land. The land was not ideal for farming whatsoever, and there was no training on how to become a productive member in the agricultural community. So I just want to highlight the last sentence in this, because it's true. We have entered a stage of civilization which brings with it problems hard for us to handle. This is our past. All right. So after the slaughters and the Indian Wars proved not to work, an era of assimilation and removal started. This was also the time of boarding schools where our children would be kidnapped and placed in these schools. I'm going to ask Christy to come up and speak a little bit more about the federal era.
The federal era was from 1900 to 1950, and accumulation and assimilation, involving reservation, the Dawes Act, Indian boarding schools, and it was a world marked by punctuality, discipline, competition, study, and punishment. A cold and friendless passage to the culture that counted. And that's a statement that it really rings true as far as what happened, because they put natives on reservations, and the way they curated these reservations is that they moved them from they were forced from their own lands, stripped of their culture, language, that type of thing. And they also had them sign up on the Dawes Rolls, and a lot of people don't know about the Dawes Rolls because if you had to be signed up to be considered Indian. And one issue with that is that there were families that were native, but they felt like, I don't need the government to tell me who I am. So therefore, that was another issue that came up with that, because in order for you to be considered native, for you to qualify for certain programs, to be enrolled in your tribe, your name, your family's name had to be on the Dawes Rolls, which were a lot of, did not include a lot of people regarding that. And regarding Indian boarding schools, we hear a lot of atrocities, and nowadays that is coming to the forefront that it was not talked about. My grandma went to a boarding school, and when they ripped their children from their families, they made them cut their hair, they made them wear uniforms, they punished them for speaking their own language, and they would have to go hide and go to the creek and sing their own songs and speak their own language just so they could keep it inside of them to try to carry that. And so that's one of the things that we've had to do as Native people, to be resilient and try to continue to grow and keep those traditions, because there's so many oral languages, oral stories that we have inside of us that were carried through our relatives that were strong enough to endure those times. And so that was something that was the policy was called kill the Indian, save the man. And so that was something that our people went through, and so we just wanted to touch on that a little bit. And Les will speak about the Osage murders.
I'm going to speak very briefly on the Osage murders itself. Let me find my spot here. Remember that quote from earlier? We have entered a stage of civilization which brings with it problems hard for us to handle. Well, this is a great example of that. See, the Dawes Act greatly limited tribal constitutions. The federal era was also an era in which the BIA gave tribals, nations, an opportunity to start writing their own constitutions, but yet there were still extremely strict guidelines. And so the Osages, like other tribes, were greatly limited with what they could say in their constitution. What complicated this is that the Osages had land that they bought, had clear title to. So it was not subject to allotment procedures under the Dawes Act. Then oil was discovered on this land. So we've created a complexity of problems that led to some of the worst elements in society encroaching up in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Has anyone ever been to Pawhuska? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, perfect, yeah, excellent. Yeah, we were up there when they were doing something. Were you able to make it up there during the filming of the movie? Yes. That's pretty cool. I'd love to see them afterwards. Okay, I'm sorry about that. But we had all these bad elements just come to Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Conspiracy folks, mobsters. They all wanted a piece of this oil money because at the time, the Osages were among the richest people in the world per capita due to this oil. And this is complicated by the Osage Constitution, what the federal government wanted. They're like, wait a second, they bought this land, it's not subject to allotment. So obviously, this created this complexity of problems, which led to what we call the Reign of Terror, because a lot of Osages lost their life under mysterious conditions during this time period. That's the movie that's coming out. I believe it's going to be in 2023. Martin Scorsese's in it. Well, he's not in it, but he directed it. And so it's one of the, please pick up that book. It's by David Grann. It'll give you a real insight to some of the complexities. And I'll be also honest to say that there were other tribes that were affected by this. The Osages are probably the most known due to the land that they had and the oil, but there was a lot of this type of dealings in all across the country with Native people. So Dallas is a relocation center. We are now kind of moving onward with the eras, and now we're going to get to the urban metropolis of Dallas, Texas, and how the natives found their way here. And so Christy wants to talk about that, so come on up here, and we'll talk about Dallas as a relocation center.
And we're making reference to the termination era of 1950, 1970, voluntary relocation. The Indian Relocation Act of 1952 was around 100,000 Native Americans experienced one of the most recent and little-known traumas inflicted on Native peoples by the U.S. government. What the BIA is going to be the Bureau of Indian Affairs, government entity called the Voluntary Relocation Program between 1952 and 1972. It provided one-way transportation and a couple $100 to Native Americans willing to move to a city. And Dallas was one of those cities, including Houston, Austin. I do believe that my father may have been participating in this program. He has passed on, so I was not able to mention it to him and discuss that issue with him. And it became what it is today, but also we're gonna discuss this slide real quick first. The purpose of this was Congress had no plans to support tribal economies and reservations. Strong belief that urbanization was the future. Some tribes, including the Navajo, supported relocation. But what really happened? When they got here, there were lack of jobs, lack of help and training, lack of social services, lack of housing, lack of employment. When you come from a certain area and you do not understand the culture and you do not understand that they do not understand fully what your traditions are, how your habits are, what you understand, and that type of thing. So it became very difficult. So how they began to combat that is that they began to actually come together. The urban natives here, and we'll especially talk about DFW, is that they came together and said, we need resources, we need help. And so they actually created a center called the Dallas Urban Intertribal Center of Texas, which has actually been here in the area for 50 years. And they just celebrated their this year for their 50-year celebration. And what that center did was say, okay, we need to be our own resource. We need to be our own help for our own people come from this to this area, because there were all kinds of natives from different areas, different reservations, different communities involved. So they had no support. And with that kinship, they developed this center that helped them find housing, helped them find jobs, helped them find training, employment, education, even health, mental health, and healthcare, limited healthcare. So that is one way that they helped build this community, because they began to come together. They had social gatherings, they had softball, they had church, they had picnics, they had all kinds of things for the kids so that they could grow and build their families here. And that's why a lot of the people have their families here, their grandchildren here, their community, and from that grew organizations, nonprofit organizations, that type of thing. And we'll bring it back to Les. Okay, I was gonna do something else.
This is where we're at today, even though I think that we've even maybe gone a little bit further to self-determination. But, the civil rights movement was happening in the 1960s, and a lot of cultural unrest was happening during this time period, and it's certainly the tribes were not immune. And self-determination, you see a rising tide of political and cultural activism was sweeping the nation, and American Indians were flexing their political skills that they have acquired through the social and political battles wages since the turn of this century. We've learned a lot, and so self-determination became the new era. This is the era that we see gaming This is the era that we see tribal economies starting to expand. This is NAGPRA, so, and then tribal colleges as well, starting to come across the United States. This is Pawnee Nation College, located up in Pawnee, Oklahoma. And that's right close to Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Just the last couple of years, we signed an agreement with Nebraska Indian College. They are accredited. Pawnee Nation College is now under their accreditation umbrella. And so we're having records enrollments. And we're providing higher education in this small, really high unemployment town. And we're looking at the needs of the community, not just of the Pawnee people, but of the Pawnee, city of Pawnee. And so this is the era of self-determination that's happening. There's a building on the Pawnee Nation College campus. It's condemned now, but it's still standing. There's efforts to make it a historical, I forgot what, someone here probably knows the term I'm looking for. But anyway, if you go up to the second, it's the old boarding room house. It's because Pawnee Nation College is a boarding school, and they called it Gravy U back in the federal era. And so if you go to and they call it Gravy U because that's what they had for lunch almost all the time, was this disgusting gravy, all right? But if you go up to the second floor of this dormitory, there's still scratched in messaging from the folks that were living there, from the Indians that were living there during this time period. And so it always thought to me be a great, qualitative type of project to go into that, get clearance to go in, because it's kind of dangerous now. You might fall through the floor. But to somehow save those scratchings, because it's really the mindset of what was happening during that time period from a young person's mind. This is what I like to think of now, is that I think we're really entering an era of new optimism. Nation building, which I alluded to, language revitalization efforts, which is critical. If you lose the language, you lose the culture. And so there's also a lot of food revitalization efforts as well, saving those recipes. And this is complicated, and I welcome if you have anything to say about this, because I know you do. This is complicated that so many of our, in fact, if you want to, you can come up and join me. So many of our ways of knowledge was passed down. It wasn't written down. It was passed down verbally. And so the revitalization efforts and recipes, language, food, mentioned the tribal colleges, these new economies coming up. Land acknowledgement has been wonderful these last couple of years. It's really refreshing to see that there is not just simply an interest, but a very, very genuine interest in understanding the complicated histories of the buildings that we do business in today. And there are new emerging battles. Water rights is probably one of the big ones. But there are new emerging battles, and there's still continued racism that's happening. That I think was always going to be there. So even though we have this period of new optimism, it certainly is a lot more work for those that are in this area to continue this optimism. Do you want to add anything to this?
Yes, thanks, Les. You did want me to add my thoughts regarding new optimism and what my ideas are on that. And I would like to elaborate on my thoughts about nation building, because lots of people don't know about tribal nations. And currently there are 537 federally recognized tribal nations in the United States. And that does not include state recognized. As far as nation building, they are exercising our own sovereignty, such as land and fishing rights. Our own tribal programs such as elder care, housing, hospitals, education, culture, our own museums, language programs, and retail. And language revitalization, we have our own language teachers, our programs such as free online classes across the nation's high schools, preschools, and it has been increasing in the last 30 years. And I'm also participating in that program because it is free. It's open to anyone who is interested in any tribal language. Tribal colleges, as Les said, Haskell Indian Nations University, Pawnee Nation College, Nebraska Indian College, and also Bacone College. And these are some of the entities that we are taking upon ourselves to have our Native students come to these colleges to learn and receive an education. Also, new economies. Tribes acquiring or starting our own businesses such as steel, recycling, concrete, ranches, farmers markets, grocery stores, and food deserts, casinos, retail, and fashion. Land acknowledgement, and entities and cities are now open to making official statements acknowledging the stolen land in which they reside or operate on. And one great thing about that is it helps build and bridge relationships with the Native people living currently in that area. And as Les said, emerging battles. Emerging battles are again like with the water rights, and a lot of times the way the optimism about that is that people are placing boycotts. There's boots on the ground. There's lots of organizations that are combating that. So we're continuing the fight with that one. And then also continued racism. The optimism about that is that there's all kinds of stereotyping, misconception. For example, I will give you an example as far as Hollywood. Hollywood stereotypes non-natives. They allow non-natives to play native roles. But the way we're combating that and being an optimist route in that is that we're combating that by we're having our own shows, our own native writers, and our own cast, like Reservation Dogs, which is very successful. Also, continued racism. Again, we were to talk about one issue that I notice is it has to do with sports. Sports and racism in sports. For example, Braves with their tomahawk chop, and even high schools that have a disparaging name for their teams. It's mostly what is behind the name, the behavior behind the name. Not always what the name is. But I will say that if, for example, the team that was formerly known as the Redskins, if you look in the dictionary states Redskin, it defines it as disparaging and offensive. A contemptuous term used to refer to a North American Indian. And so it's that type of behavior. When you have that type of name, you cannot go to another place in blackface or anything like that, but they would allow people to wear red face and that type of racism and think it's okay. Or they would say, even high school teams would say, scalp them. They would say, we're gonna send you home on the second Trail of Tears, that type of thing. So as far as optimism, I believe with optimism, how we're combating that is that we have organizations such as the National Congress of American Indians. Does anyone know what the National Congress of American Indians is? Okay, great. Well, it's this nation's largest, oldest tribally represented organization in the United States. So it's not a new battle, but it is social media and the internet has made it new. So that type of thing. So we do have organizations also like the APA, the American Psychological Association, that backs us that these type of things are harmful to not only Native children, but all children. So that is one of the things that we're combating, and we have some optimism because we have some support in other aspects.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap this up to continue on with the next part of the program. I'm gonna go through quickly and just show you some pictures of the new Land Acknowledgement Courtyard at UT Arlington. We just had Indigenous Peoples Day on October 10th, which is Columbus Day. And on our campus, it's Indigenous Peoples Day. The mayor of Arlington was there, and he proclaimed the city as Indigenous Peoples Day as well. That gives you a little bit of timeline of our land acknowledgement process. But I want to get to, those are challenges. I don't have time to go through the challenges, unfortunately, but I'd love to talk to you guys about it if anyone has any questions about it. But, and of course, we have some successes, including the resounding support. I cannot talk about the resounding support of the university. That has just been overwhelming. And, but see, this was the location. It's right north of the library. If you've been on our campus, you might recognize the roundhouse. But there was a water feature that was right there that was broken down. This is a big area in the middle of campus. And so they painted the buildings. Of course, they painted a lot of the buildings. I think it was part of the process. And some members of the Land Acknowledgement Committee was trying to figure out where to put the stone. And then this was our celebration that we had. So we had close to 300 people there. That's the top left picture. Top right picture is Samson Dewey, who's unable to be here today. He's the president of Native American Student Association. He's with Jim Ross. Is it Ross, the mayor of Arlington? And so we have a wonderful hand-stitched banner in the back. We had that rock there that had the statement on it that's covered by a blanket to the bottom left there. And there it is. So I'll end with how I started. We've come a long way. And so thank you so much. This is a little bit about our future. So thank you. Any questions? I think we have another part of the program now, or is there time for questions? Okay. We'll be sticking around a little bit.
Yeah, I just want to thank y'all for so much for sharing. This isn't easy subject or topics, but it's important and very educational and inspiring, and I appreciate your efforts. And on a personal level, I just want to say how much I appreciate both of you. My son, Samuel, is named after his great-grandfather, Samuel Postoke, who was a survivor of the Carlisle boarding school, Choctaw. And it means a lot to have that marker at UTA. That's important for my son. That's important work that they're doing. And I really appreciate your leadership, Dr. Wrightingham, and Christy and the Choctaw community. You are a bright, shining light, and I appreciate everything you do and your leadership for in the Choctaw and in Dallas and Fort Worth. And I am excited about continuing our presentation. We are going to have Indigenous ACE with a cultural dance, and let's have them begin.
We are happy to be here. My name is Melissa Guerrero. We don't worry about I'm used to being interactive, dealing with elementary students and everything. My name is Melissa Guerrero, proud to be here. We appreciate you having us here. It means a lot to educate anybody regarding the culture and the history of this native land. My daughter, I'm pretty sure she's really excited to be here because she gets to stay out of school to be here. And this is Jed. He'll be dancing, one of our performers as well. We are part of Indigenous ACE. And the ACE stands for Arts, Culture, and Education. And what we emphasize on that is the education aspect. We love to entertain you and show you what we have and shake our moves, show you our moves. But we want to let you know what the history is behind each dance. And it has an extensive history behind it. So with that being said, we'll get started on the entertainment. Let's see. Just bear with me 1 second. Technology. It's either your best friend or your enemy, right? I'm going to test it. Okay. Appreciate it. So I do apologize. Usually it's my husband that runs things, but you know, we're adults and we have bills to pay, so he's at work making money so I can enjoy life and hot water. So what we like to do is to go in chronological order with these different styles, they came at different times. Do yours first, or mine? I'll go first. Okay. So we're gonna go with my style. My style is now part of a circuit of dancing called powwows. So initially, this wasn't on that. My style is known as the healing dance. So the story behind that was there was a young girl who was ill, and it progressed. And of course, we don't have modern day medicine like back then, so they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. So her uncle prayed and tried to figure out to the Creator, asking, "What do I need to do to heal her?" And the Creator spoke to her uncle and said, "Here is this dress. Make this dress for your niece. Here is a song. Sing it for her. Teach it to your people, and bring her in and dance. Have her put her in this dress and have her dance." So they brought her in, and of course, at this point, she couldn't walk, so she couldn't move. And so as the song progressed, they started singing, and then they started noticing something. She started moving her hand. She started moving to the beat, and as the song continued, she started to get up and walk. So with that, they shared it with the entire community, as well as traveled and teaching people the healing dance. Now, initially, we didn't have these metal cones. This was introduced by Europeans. Did you know Native Americans were the first people to recycle? So initially, these were what we used and what we utilized, what we had. So these were initially shells. And then slowly, Europeans, they're actually snuff can lids rolled up. There should be 365. So number sounds familiar to you? It represents one for each day of the year. So I do want to take a little extra time. I appreciate it. I am from Fort Worth, grew up and born and raised here, went to Arlington Heights High School, graduated from there. I have a friend that I still communicate with, and there was a little incident that occurred with her sister. She's one of the officers that got shot in a training at David K. Sellers here in town. So I'm gonna dedicate this style for her. While we dance, we do pray. We pray for those who are unable to dance. We pray for those who need any kind of healing, whether it's emotional, mental, or physical. So I dedicate this to her. Thank you.
Testing. Hello, my name is Jed Thompson. I represent the Coushatta tribe of Louisiana. The dance that I'm presenting to you today, this is called the Men's Prairie Chicken Dance. This dance is a little more over 100 years ago. It represents, as I said, the prairie chicken. It mimics the prairie chicken. I don't know if you've seen how the prairie chicken dances. You know, they do these little ruffles of the feet. Well, that's what this dance does. And as I said, it mimics. It's also a courting dance, they call it. And the male chicken, you know, does his best to attract the female prairie chicken's eye. And of course, like all male dancers, if you know you don't do your best moves, you don't get their attention. But as I'm dancing, I'm going to try to do my best and see if you can see some bird movement out there. So this is the prairie chicken dance.
Thank you. And we like to save the best for last, of course. So, moving on forward with our chronological order. This style is going to be our most contemporary style. It's probably started in the early 1900s, 1920s, with known as the male counterpart, the crazy dance. You know, during that time, the Charleston was going on, and with relocating a bunch of tribes onto reservations, and these gentlemen were used to hunting and competing and just living off the land, right? So now they're confined to this reservation and having to modify their way of living. So the way these young men used to let out a little bit of their testosterone and boast themselves as they started competing. And it's brought into our men's fancy dance. So they become more showy. These are our showcase, our athletes of the arena, usually the younger guys. And they are just that, the athletes. The song becomes faster, and they're showing off as well. As time progressed, they noticed these certain gentlemen started beating them, beating the best of the men. And the guys were trying to figure out, who are these guys? I mean, we don't see them. Are they from the north? Where are they from? And so they go on to talk, come to find out, it's the women that started dressing up as the men and beating them. So some tribes still have specials where they have the women dress up as the men's fancy dance. But men, they decided we need to give them their own style. We can't let the women beat us anymore. So women traditionally carried their shawl on their arm, and they walked gracefully, and they carried the sway of like the grass. With the women's fancy shawl, they now drape the shawl over the shoulders, and there are athletes of our arena, more contemporary, mimicking sort of their male counterparts, faster footwork, kicking out. They're also known as the butterfly dance. Just like the different phases of the butterfly, we go from a caterpillar to cocoon into this gorgeous butterfly, also reflects what women have to go through as a child, adolescence, into adulthood. So with that being said, we're gonna bring out our mini fancy shawl dancer. And she does like me to say, if you cheer her on, she dances harder. She's not shy. All right, bear with me a second. Come on, Audrey. This is Audrey. She is Wastek, Saponi, and Apache. Come on. And as you see this, you think about the way we dance and everything. Children are start at a very young age. My daughter was dancing. I was dancing with her in my stomach. And then she was in a bumbo, and we put her in their dance arena. They're known as our tiny tots. And then they move on up. Come on, Audrey. So. All right, here we go. She's ready. Ooh. Thank you. So, with that being said, I know we just recently, with October, we had Halloween. And I always tell the kids, well, what do we wear on Halloween? And of course, they all know what it is. It's a costume, yes. One thing that a costume is something that you pretend to be, or it's just a character. So, with our outfits, we veer them as sort of like the military, our uniforms, also known as regalia. So we never refer to our outfits as costumes, they're regalias. So, because a lot of this has history, a lot of it represents where we come from, the tribe. You can usually tell an individual what tribe they come from. Our Comanche, I have a sister-in-law that's Comanche. When she dances traditional, she has tabs on the side, or she wears a skirt. These are known to our Comanche tribe. I'm wearing a Sioux design, Lakota design. A lot of them represent our tribes, like Jed over here, of the Coushatta tribe, with his emblem on the front. So it means a lot to us. A lot of this stuff as well is also old. My daughter's outfit is about 10 years old. She's not 10. It's been handed down to her. So we have high respect for the outfits that we wear because a lot of this is generational. Some people's pieces are 3 to 4 generations down. So with that being said, that concludes our dances. Does anybody have any questions for us? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, the ones on my bustle, yes, they're prairie chicken. The fan that I'm holding, this is actual eagle feathers. And these right here, I don't know what feathers they are.
Yes. And I'm not sure if anybody knows, but Native Americans are the only individuals that are able to obtain and possess eagle feathers. So they mean a lot. We hold them in high regard because in the Bible it does say of all God's creatures, they fly the highest. So we use them to take our prayers up to God. So, any other questions? No. All right, well, we thank you and we appreciate this. It's into taking steps to recognize the history and how much the indigenous culture is intertwined in our government. My daughter brought a pamphlet the other day in regards to the Declaration of Independence. And I was asking her, do you know where they got that idea from? And she's like, no. It's from the Native Americans. It's from the Confederacy. It's from the Six Nations up top, as well as the lacrosse. Lacrosse. People are not aware that that is the creator's game. It comes from the Six Nations as well, the Onondaga. And if y'all don't have an opportunity, you actually have one of the tribal members of the Onondaga play for Fort Worth's new professional lacrosse team at Dickey's Arena. So. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for our dancers, our presenters, for all the employees that helped plan today's program. Veronica Villegas is a big part of this program today, but she's been sick, so I ask you all to include her for healing prayers. Linda Tuggle is here, and I want to recognize her. She came in and did a lot of the heavy lifting for this event today in Veronica's absence. And so, Linda, thank you for all you do. And I want to thank the audience for everybody that came today and the employees at the City of Fort Worth and helping to recognize this Native American Heritage Month. To our city leadership, thank you for your support not only of this program, but for diversity and inclusion, for the employee committee and the efforts to promote a greater understanding and appreciation for diversity and inclusiveness throughout our employee population. And be sure to read the roundup to learn about opportunities to help plan and attend future events. Thank you.